I want to make a video about the British having to tackle counterinsurgents and pan-Arabist movements in the Middle Eastern region in my Suez Crisis video. However, the British Army faced another, slightly more longer-lasting, prolonged period of conflict against trying to suppress another independence uprising in the Middle East, and that was the Aden emergency, which began on the 14th of October 1963 and lasted to the 30th of November 1967. Sources are linked down in the description. Let's begin. Ever since 1839, the British managed to least away from the Ottoman Empire the state of Aden and later Aden Protectorate. Nowadays it makes up modern Yemen, but the British controlled all the coastal regions, and they only left a small independent northern sort of Yemen republic within the modern state of Yemen that existed today. And it was a major trading port and became very important once the Suez Canal was completed in the 1880s, and of course in 1880, and of course it controlled that vital trade route to India and the Far Eastern colonies. And during the First World War, had a fair good bit to play against the Ottoman Empire. Lawrence Arabia was very much near the region and had vital importance attacking the Ottomans, increasing Arab sentiment throughout the region against the Ottoman Empire, and they gained a little bit more territory from the Ottomans in the state of the Aden Protectorate following the First World War. And so actually little action during the Second World War, apart from maintaining British ships going over to India to fight the Japanese, eventually, Burma, Malaya, etc. However, World War II had ended, Britain was slightly bankrupt, and with new Prime Minister Clement Attlee, it was time for decolonisation, and you couldn't just walk into a country and kill everyone anymore to colonise it, which is a nice change of colour. However, following the Suez Crisis, which I've already made a video on, feel free to check it out, it was quite hard what the British decided to do with Aden, because at the end of the day, it was similar to, such as Gibraltar or Singapore. It's quite important economically, to control that trade there, particularly in the region, right next to, of course, like modern day Somalia, Eritrea. There's also pirates in the region who like to jump, particularly, like British colonial shipping, and attack their colonisers. Of course, Somalia was also northern Somaliland was also a British colony, was also fighting a civil war at this point, which definitely is probably worth making a video on. A very interesting African history about the Cold War, and this is yet again another part of that. The Cold War that you don't see. 1960 was also full of the Cuban Missile Crisis, but it was also full of many, Africans, Middle Easterns trying to fight independence movements and very high death tolls. And as you'll see, Aden emergency was no exception. On the 14th of October 1963, the war, I nearly said war then, that's another conflict, the war officially began. Of course, declarations of war don't really exist at this point, but the war began effectively because the Flossie and the NLF were formed. NLF, by the way, stands for National Liberation Front. That's obvious. What gets confusing is that in my French-Algerian War video, there's the FLN, which are also pan-Arabist, which are also fighting an anti-colonial movement. They both mean the same thing, but in English and French. They have the same objectives. It gets a bit confusing. But yeah, it's interesting. NLF and Flossie against, of course, the British Army. They were headed by, I can apologise for this pronunciation already, their leader of the Aden independence movements was Kundun al-Shadi. That's not even how you spell his name on the script. I changed the script to make it so I could pronounce it. I don't know how to spell his name in real life. However, at the end of the video, I put some statistics on the screen so you can see more about the name. Just generally my rubbish pronunciation. It was a very interesting warfare. It was very much more sort of street fighting. It was a new dynamic for the British, which it only ever really encountered during the Irish War of Independence. It's the key word I'm looking for here. There we are, the IRA. The British only really faced sort of urban guerrilla tactics against the IRA in Ireland. So this was quite, new ground. Not fighting a battle on battle, not fighting, guerrilla stuff, fighting in the jungle or need for bombing at Germans in World War II. This is a new urban street fighting. You turn around the corner and you can get shot at. Again, very similar to what was happening in Algiers in the French-Algerian War, which adds to the confusing coherence between the NLF and the FLN in Algeria. But we won't get tired. We'll just focus on the Aden emergency. The British had a very key colonel and military commander in the region, which was nicknamed Mad Mitch, who, if you see how he talks now, behaves, is literally the definition of British. If you look in the dictionary, this is probably the man you'd probably find for a British person. He sounds like he literally could be head of Harrow School or could be the Prime Minister. He wasn't a form of imperialist by modern standards, but he was very good at his job, we can say that for the least. He retook Crater during the Aden emergency, and his goal was to not necessarily maintain Aden as a British colony. Even he knew the imperial days were over by the Fourth War ending by the 3rd of November 1967. But he was very successful. When the British did retake Crater, which was taken by the NLF in the Aden emergency, he did manage to retake it with very, very minimal casualties. And when he was there in the clip you've already seen now, while I'm talking, or have seen, depending on how I edit it, he was very thorough. He stopped cars coming that had Flossie or NLF leaders. He would quite brutally remove people who tried to attack the British. And he said himself, if anyone wants to shoot with a pistol or with grenades, we will kill them. And quite rightly, he was very determined to not just let this sort of... I think with the emergency, the British didn't want like another sort of Palestine situation or another sort of Iraqi, you know what I mean, like another sort of you leave and all hell breaks loose. Or as you can see, this still kind of happened, that decolonization for you. And when you engage it, teaches the British not just draw a line on the map in 1839 when they took the territory from the Ottomans and decide that's how it will be. But yes, Mad Mitchell, British Prime Minister at the time, Harold Wilson, they didn't just want another sort of bloodshed in the region for independence. They wanted it done somewhat smoothly, and they wanted to control the region throughout the time to see that smooth transition. But finally, to continue, many fires in Aden city, not just it was also a city, Aden. Many urbanized guerrilla-style fighting, Molotov cocktails, street blocks, drive-by shootings to attack the British. It was all done very effectively. Equally, the British, like at Crater, and throughout much of the colony of British Protectorate of Aden, they had many battles with the Flossie and NLF, but again, mainly in street and fighting corners. And it was quite a prolonged conflict, and it did take its toll over time. And here are all statistics for you: over 2,000 casualties, people killed by the end of the conflict. And of course, the conflict did end, as we pretty much all knew it would, even when the conflict began on the 14th of October 1963. The Aden British colony gained its independence after 128 years of British rule and became Yemen. And of course, unfortunately in 2014, due to that little trouble to the left side in the west with the independent Republic of Yemen that already existed, and the two sides now having to get along and live with each other, civil war occurred. And so the British still didn't really get what they wanted. You know, Mad Mitch, Harold Wilson, they were still fighting. Even Yanku al-Shaki, I think that's how I pronounce his name, the leader of the Aden independence movement, didn't really get what they want. There was still violence in the region following that. So in conclusion, you know, the Aden emergency was just that. It was another very interesting bit of decolonization, pan-Arabism in the region. Again, it was mainly accelerated by people like Gamal Abdel Nasser, the idea that all Arab states should be free of imperialism and be unified. Of course, that's why it probably lasted so long as it did, and, you know, accelerated. The idea of self-government was only accelerating in the region. Again, following the Suez Crisis, seeing, you know, Britain, France, Israelis gaining the upper hand, it only accelerated the cause of independence, and many, you know, Arab states like Aden wanted independence from Britain and self-governance. And yeah, it was really quite an interesting conflict, and again, it's that really interesting part of the Cold War, which isn't often discussed, which I make to make videos on it, you know, with many video history topics I make on the stuff that isn't quite talked about, but I'm also really interested in. I mean, I sort of, you know, decolonization and empires and sort of 17th, 18th century. That's my very sort of specialized area of history, which I like all history, but those are the bits I know most about, so I'm most confident making videos on. So yeah, that is the Aden emergency. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next YouTube video. You can check out all my history videos in my history playlist. I definitely would recommend learning more about this conflict. Wikipedia, YouTube videos, the sources are linked down in the description, so you can quite easily find them where I found my stuff from. And it's a really quite interesting conflict. The idea of guerrilla stuff fighting in urban areas, how you can inflict quite high casualties very quickly, good use by the NLF and Flossie of AK-47s, rifles and pistols and grenades. And the British with the 303 rifle, although after the conflict was nearly put into disuse, mainly with submachine guns, how close quarters it was, which is why it was quite so effective and why ultimately they won. again, they beat the British and gain independence because the British aren't used to that close quarter combat fighting. They literally have to go into houses and capture any NLF or Flossie people in the war, the end emergency, which of course wasn't easily so easily done compared to the NLF and Flossie, were much more close to close quarter fighting and quickly attacking the British. The British, they're more used to sort of a long range warfare with rifles rather than some machine guns. So I'll see you in the next YouTube video. Goodbye.